Hi guys, I'm David Dismanat with Media Unlocked, and of course we're hanging out with Bill, who is becoming a more constant thing around here at Media Unlocked.
I'm just such a nice guy.
You are?
Okay, so we're here to talk about the new Nikon D850. Now, disclaimer time, of course, we are Canon guys.
Big time.
On the other hand, Canon may have a few things. Well, I'm gonna let David, you tell me about Canon. What do you think?
I love Canon. I just feel like they're not moving forward as fast as I want them to, as I feel like true Canon lovers want them to, and it's hurting Canon. Sony and Nikon, especially Sony. Sony does an excellent job of listening to their customers and trying to make cameras that their customers want, adding in the features that their customers want. And, well, with this new Nikon, I think Nikon did a pretty good job of listening to their customers. I'm impressed with what we're about to go over here, where I think Canon is lacking. Now, the one thing Bill and I will definitely agree on is that we love Canon's glass.
Yeah, we love Canon glass. And we're not going to talk about Canon glass because, frankly, I don't think there's anything better out there as a line. I mean, you may have individual problems with individual lenses, but as a line, Canon glass is great.
And so I feel like that from the D810 to the D850, of course, what the specs are out there for the D850. Yep. This is a jump. This is a big jump.
It's a huge jump.
And it was way bigger jump from the Canon Mark III to the Mark IV. And a lot of the issues that people have with the Mark IV, actually, Nikon, I guess, saw what even the Canon people were saying, and like, okay, well, we're not going to make that same mistake, and we're going to give you guys something that you want.
Now, I've got a few issues with the 850. Right. And by the way, just for the record, no, we don't have a new 850. Nobody has a new 850 right now. We have an 810 box that I borrowed from a friend.
Start off with the megapixels. So we are going in at 45.7 megapixels for the Nikon D850.
And guys, we're talking medium format size here in megapixels.
In megapixels, not in sensor size.
Not in sensor size. And now,
that's where people get confused, I think, sometimes.
Don't get me wrong. The sensor size is a big deal.
Right.
It's a big deal. There's some laws of physics here that you just cannot get around. But with 47, 46 megapixels, you know, I have taken images before where I decided what I wanted was a little bit of the image.
Right.
So I've thrown away 15 megapixels.
Exactly.
And on a 24, 25 megapixel image, that's a big deal. On a 47 megapixel image, it's not that big of a deal.
Right. It is now it is a jump from the Nikon D810, which is at 36.2 megapixels. Yeah. So you're right at around 10 extra megapixels for this. And the question is, do you need that extra 10 megapixels?
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. We all know that the megapixel debate these days is settled. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Once they got above 20, it's gonna be able to print your 16 by 20s, your 24 by 30s.
And unless you are that part of that 1% of photographers that prints billboards, you don't need 47 megapixels. Or you don't need 35.
Unless you're really cropping down, you know, you're shooting large and you're cropping down, those extra megapixels matter. But we do have a 45.7 megapixel camera in the
It will
Nikon
be useful.
D850.
And if it wasn't an issue of the price and whether it's worth it for the price, it'd be no debate. Of course, you get the more megapixels. But the additional price, is it worth it? That's always a question. And if you're a professional photographer, if you're working at that top level, sure, you're going to get it. But if you're a prosumer, if you are the kind of person that, like I do, where most of what you're printing is under 3 feet, I don't need those megapixels. I'd like to have them.
Right.
I'd love to have them, but I don't need them.
You do get 14-bit lossless files. Now, what this means when you're shooting RAW, you're looking at between 80 megabytes and 90 megabytes per file, per picture.
That is huge.
That is going to run through your SD cards, your media. The nice thing is, again, you're going to have a lot to work with in those RAW files at 14-bit lossless. But you're going to need large cards. The good thing is cards are getting cheaper.
Cards are getting cheaper. And, you know, with external drives and things like that. But think about this for a minute. If I go into Photoshop with an 80 meg base, and I put in a couple of stamp visible layers, I create a few more layers, all of a sudden my file size, where now is maybe 150 megabytes when I'm done with the Photoshop, what's it going to be if I start with 80 instead of 25?
It's going to slow your computer way down.
It's going to slow the computer down.
When I had the Canon 5DS,
I had problems with that.
Yeah,
I had problems.
I did a real estate for a friend of mine. They needed me to shoot a house, so I helped them out with it. And so when I do real estate photos, I do HDR. So that means I was combining 3 RAW files that were, I think, 75 megabytes. And by the time we were done, we're looking at like half a gig for one picture. and it took my computer's pretty much state of the art. It's a great computer. It struggled when I was trying to produce these HDR photos, and I had to produce, like 20 of them.
If you go with this, and if you're going to shift over to it, you may want to consider whether your software, whether your computer is up to that deal.
Because it's going to be really annoying to have a camera shooting in RAW at a full res and then going in and editing that.
And especially if you're like I am, you'd have to put all of your Canon gear at the pawn shop and go into Hawk to buy the thing in the first place. I wouldn't have enough to buy a new computer.
Yeah. So next on the list is ISO. Goes all the way down to 64, all the way up to 25,600. I'm really excited to see how the ISO, because I think that's one of the biggest debates when it comes to new cameras coming out, especially full frame, is how well does it do in low light?
And I want 64. Now, I'm a night shooter. I love low light photography. Yeah. I shoot at night a lot of the times. I'm one of these guys, I grab my camera and I go downtown and I roam around just because I love the night scene and I love shooting nightlife. I really love that low light photography, and I'm looking forward to see it also. And I got to admit, that 64 is intriguing me. I mean, I learned how to shoot back in the old film days, and I remember getting 32 in my slides. And for daylight photography, for landscape photography, 32 is so sweet. Going down to 64 native is big. Great. My Canon stops at 100. I mean, I can take it down to 50, but it does really funny things.
Sony's that go as low as 64 as well. So this is not the first, of course, the first camera to do the 64 ISO. And then most cameras I find between 3,000 and 4,000 is where the ISO really starts to show through. Even at the nicer, even like the Sony A7S II. Even at 4,000 and 5,000, you can kind of see that ISO, but it's still pretty clean. So I am interested to see how the Nikon sensor does with ISO. Now it will be expanded outside of the natively out to 102,000. So if you want to go, I
want to see the noise pattern on that thing.
The only good thing that's going to be great for is if you want to go into your live view mode and you're shooting stars, so you want that extra ISO to try to focus in on your stars, and then you drop it back down to around like 2,000 or 3,000. Now let's talk about frames per second.
Let's talk about frames per second,
because this is something we might get stuck on for a few minutes.
Yeah,
it's something
there's some issues here.
We like and don't. Well, we don't really like the way Nikon set this up. So,
and again, I should point out, we haven't tried this.
Right.
We're working from the spec sheets that Nikon has been putting out, and from their pre-release publicity.
Yeah. So 7 frames per second.
And that's good.
Right out of the camera.
That's really good. Right out of the camera.
Now we can get up to 9 frames per second.
If you do it right.
And this is the problem. You got to get a battery grip. You'll need extra batteries.
You need D5 batteries?
Yeah. You'll have to get the battery grip, the MB-D18. So you'll need that Nikon battery grip to get that extra 2 frames per second. That is going to run you $399, $396. Then you're going to get their battery charger, which is the MH26AAK. It's $370.
Oh.
And then on top of that, and then maybe some of this you might be able to go third party eventually, but not right off the bat.
Not off the bat.
You need to get their EN-EL15 battery, which are $60 a pop. No, it will come with the battery, so if you don't already have a battery, it's going to cost you $60 to get another battery. Yep. You're
going to need another battery.
$825 to get 2 more frames per second. And what's the issue that you found, even with the battery grip, what can happen?
Well, even with the battery grip, you've got card issues.
Yep.
You've got speed issues in there. If you're running a lower level card, you're never going to get to 9 anyway, no matter what you did.
Yes.
And part of the issue is that, are you going to get that extra 2 frames?
Right.
Part of my other issue is that extra 2 frames. Is it worth another $1,000?
Yeah, pretty much $1,000. And if you block your mirror to do the 7 frames per second, you are stuck.
You're stuck at 7 frames. So if you lock the mirror up.
So even with all that, spending almost $1,000 extra, if you lock your mirror, guess what? You're stuck at 7 either way.
So that house payment that you just spent, you really should have kept.
So I think that there's some value in spending the extra $1,000, but these are for the people that make a living off that extra 2 frames per second. And again, it goes back to that kind of 1%, 2% of photographers that are really needing that.
We've got one of the world's greatest horse racing tracks right down the street from us here at Keeneland.
Yeah.
And if I'm at Keeneland and I'm shooting the horses, I need that extra 2. Yeah. And I'm going to spend whatever it takes to get that. But if you need it, you need it. You pay for it and you move on.
Yeah.
But do you need it?
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I'm loving the specs on this camera. I'm absolutely loving it. But I'm questioning whether the price is starting to outpace
for those
the benefit.
Exactly. So the body only price is $3,300. Now, Bill and I may vary on the decision on this as far as what our opinion is, but I think for $3,300 what this camera is offering, I think it's a very reasonable price.
I am not disagreeing with you at all. And I think it's a great price for it. I spent 25-ish on my Mark III after the price had started to drop because they had released the Mark IV.
And the Mark IV came out at high threes, low fours?
I was thinking it was mid to high threes.
Okay, mid to high threes, yeah.
Depending on whether it had the rebate.
I think a lot of people expected this camera to be around $3,600 to $4,000. So at $3,300 for the body only, I think, in my opinion, if I was a Nikon shooter at that price, I would be really looking at it. Early to mid-September is going to be the release date. I've heard September 7th. I don't know if that is the exact day. I don't know if that's when it's going to be out, but that's what I've heard, September 7th. So it's early to mid-September is when it will be out. Hopefully we'll get our hands on one within the first couple months, and we'll actually get a chance to test it out.
And did you
if
know
we can figure out how to work a Nikon.
Do they have on switches?
I don't know. They're very confusing.
Yeah,
bodies.
it's Nikon.
It's hard to go from Canon to Nikon.
And one thing to point out that go to B&H, and what you're going to find is somewhere on their site they'll have a link to this, because B&H just put out a web panel.
You can get 51 frames at 14-bit lossless shooting at 7 frames per second. Think about that. 51 frames at 7 frames per second. 14-bit lossless. Lossless. I can't will. And you can get it at 9 frames with the battery grip. Now at 12-bit, you can get 170 pictures.
Ain't that great?
I mean, could you imagine hold down the shutter? I mean, that's going to be just crazy. I mean, yeah, 12-bit.
Yeah.
170 frames at 12-bit, or 51 frames, and that's full res at 51.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty impressive.
And that's huge. And nobody is questioning the technical capabilities, assuming that the camera lives up to the specs that we've seen, which it should. I mean, there's no reason it couldn't. Nobody's questioning that isn't an absolutely wonderful thing, and there's some great, fantastic innovations here. Yeah. And hopefully Nikon can translate this, because they've had a few issues lately. Yeah. And hopefully this is going to bring them back, because I like having Nikon around. It gives me somebody to beat up on as a Canon shooter.
If we don't have any Nikon shooters around,
I have to pick on Sony and Fuji, and they're just not as much fun to pick on.
Not at all. Well, there's just not as many of them out there.
That's why they're not as much fun to pick on.
So you get 153 focusing points. 99 of them are cross-focusing.
And 100 of them are cross-hatched.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. So as far as focusing goes, now for me and Bill, that's really big, because we do a lot of studio work where we're working with models, and being able to pick exact specific spots, especially being able to get the eye, because the focal point is so important when we're shooting a model. So we're really excited about that. It's the same as the Nikon D5. We're going to have, it's going to be a touchscreen, as well as going to be tilted, so it's not going to be like Canon's where you can flip it out to the side and then move it. It's going to be tilted, so it'll be on the back of the camera, and you'll just kind of tilt it. Actually, you could get 6 frames per second in silent mode, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yes, it is.
So taking 6 frames in complete silent mode. I'm really interested in how silent the silent mode is going to be.
It should be really good.
Yeah.
It should be really good. Canon has got a pretty quiet system as well, and I've heard this one is going to be better.
So I don't know if Sony's the best. Sony's quiet.
Sony is quiet. I mean,
Sony
could sneak up on you at night with a knife, and you'd never know it.
Very true. Next is the media that's going to be going in the Nikon.
And this is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal.
XQD and SD card is we'll have one XQD and SD card.
And when the Mark IV came out, Canon puts it out with a CF slot and an SD slot.
And so this is another issue that I had with Canon when they came out with the Mark IV,
which had a CF and an SD.
The 5D Mark IV had an SD and a CF.
And of course, by going with that particular media, they're just giving fuel to the fire, so the acceleration of the changeover is going to go bigger now.
Yes.
And frankly, Canon's got to get on the stick.
They do. Illumination buttons for night shooting. Now this I think is really cool.
We're going night shooting. We were going to go last week, but David got tired. He wimped out.
We actually had a weather issue.
Yeah.
Blame it on me. Sure, I'll take the blame. Not Mother Nature.
But the point is, those illuminated buttons would be a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to see all the buttons and
because I don't know about you, I know my Mark III well.
But it's hard to see it when it's dark outside.
I still can't find the buttons sometimes, because especially now that I've shifted over to back button focus.
It does have built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. No GPS though.
No GPS, and everything's getting built-in Wi-Fi these days. That's not an innovation. It's convenient.
Yeah,
it's great.
Good. I mean,
and with an iFi card.
Yeah, it's standard now with the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth.
But the GPS would be a good thing, especially for landscape photography.
It would, and the reason that I don't think the GPS is that big of a deal is, one, I think it's...
You can add it in metadata.
You can add it in the metadata. You can spend, I think it's $100, $150 for a piece that connects to the camera so that it can do that. Or guess what? You ever heard of these little things called a smartphone?
What's a smartphone?
Yeah, these little guys, they're going to give you all the information you need. And then again, you add that information off your smartphone into your metadata if you have signal, or you just happen to have an actual GPS unit.
Yeah.
So there's ways to get around that for
But it'd be nice to have it in the camera so you didn't have to have the extra
But
stuff.
I'm not dying or crying over not having GPS.
Not a big deal.
Still, focus stacking. Now, this guy likes to focus stack, and he's got a little excited when he saw this feature.
Okay, I have a love-hate with this one. I really do. I have a real love-hate here. Yeah, I do a lot of focus stacking. In fact, I would probably venture to say that maybe 15 or 20% of my photography that doesn't involve people is focus stacked. I do a lot of it. I love focus stacking. I love picking my depth, pure and simple. And the new D850, it has the capability where you can set this up where it will automatically shoot 300 exposures for you. 300. That I can't even imagine a 300 shot focus stack, but it will shoot 300 exposures. It will put it into a file for you. Renumber them.
And it will put it in a separate folder on the card so that you're not going to get confused where they're at.
It should be as simple as, okay, I've shot it, I've loaded it, and now I need to print it and be done with it. Just a little bit of minor correction. But here's the catch. Have we just invented a 47 megapixel point and shoot?
Yeah.
I mean, that costs $3,500 by the time you pay tax on it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the idea in my head.
Right.
But I wonder how well it's going to work. Because for one thing, 300 images on a focus stack that might be this deep is so many images that there's really so much duplication.
It's going to be a lot of work. Again, that comes back to your computer's going to get bogged down.
Exactly.
It's going to slow down when it's trying to do the work. Let's talk time lapse.
Yeah, time lapse is good.
I think the time lapse feature is really cool, and in a way, you could almost say Nikon went backwards or thought this through. Let's just say they thought this through before they made the time lapse feature, which I think is really cool. Okay, you're going to be able to get 8K time lapse. Now, here's the really cool thing about getting 8K time lapse. If you have like my Canon 6D, I could do time lapse, but then it will do all the editing in camera for me. Okay? I hate that. I want, again, coming back to the focus stacking, I want to be able to manually control how I edit my time lapse, picture by picture. I use a program called LR Time Lapse, which is amazing, and I just make amazing time lapses with it. Well, Nikon is allowing us to have the 8K time lapse with an intervalometer built in, and it's not going to do the processing inside the camera. It's going to allow me to bring all the files into my computer and edit it like I normally would. And I'm super excited about this.
And I've never done time lapse. One day I want you to get you to show me how to do it, because I like it. I like the idea. I mean, to me, a time lapse is putting a GoPro in the corner on the phone, turning it on, and going back a couple of days later when you think about it.
So I've done lots and lots of time lapses over the years, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I've done star time lapses, sunset time lapses. They're just fun, and so this is a really, really cool feature that I really like. The really cool thing about the silence time lapse is that it's going to lock your mirror, and when it locks your mirror, mainly your shutter's not going to be going in and up.
And that is going to keep those actuations down a lot. I mean, that's a huge thing. Yeah. Your camera is you got somewhere in the ballpark of 200,000 actuations.
I think that's what this is rated for.
This is rated for
200 shutter.
Now that doesn't mean that at 200,001 your camera just like looks at you and sticks its tongue out and dies.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you're going to need some serious work and some serious serving somewhere in the ballpark, because everything that's mechanical has a rated life.
Yes.
And by keeping that actuation down, especially with a time lapse, that's a big deal.
Let's see what else we got. It optically has a low pass filter to preserve maximum sharpness. Now, a lot of these newer cameras are going to have that low pass filter. The 5DSR has it.
Yeah, and there's so many great easy ways to sharpen in post.
I think it's supposed to help out with the moiré as well.
Yeah.
Or is it aliasing? I always get confused which it is.
Moiré's the little curvy
thing. So it's moiré.
Yeah.
It's supposed to help out with that with the low pass filter as well.
And there's nothing at all wrong with that, but we're going to sharpen before we post anyway. We're going to sharpen before we print. There's so many ways in there. I'm not sure how much they can add, because it's going to be, so many people over sharpen anyway.
So Bill, who do you think this camera's for? Why would you want to go out and get this camera? Even though, let's just try to put our mindset that we're Nikon shooters and not Canon shooters for a second.
If you're a pro who makes your living with your camera, and you shoot where you need the speed,
Right.
where you need that degree of precision, this camera is for you.
Yeah.
At this price point, it's coming in at $3,000 to $3,500, depending on sales and rebates and everything else and tax. At this point, it's in your price range for any pro photographer if you're making a living with your camera. If you are the kind of hobbyist that's going to go into Sam's Club and buy a Nikon or Canon kit camera, this is not for you.
Yeah.
But it never was anyway. That's not who Nikon is designing this for.
I think the landscape photographer.
For landscape?
Now, this is where those megapixels become valuable to you.
Oh, those megapixels are valuable. The 64 on the ISO native is valuable. Of course, my Canon lens is valuable.
Very true.
And you know, if you're a top level pro, this is a great choice in cameras. It is a significant upgrade from the 810. And frankly, as a Canon shooter, there are some features here that I want to go to Canon and I want to show them the user's guide for this thing and say, why the hell haven't you put this in your camera?
Why don't we have this?
Yeah, because I want this in my camera. I want this in the next Canon that I buy. I got a lot of Canon glass. I'd hate to have to replace it with Nikon, but this is actually making me think about it a little bit. And I'm sorry, but I have to think about buying a Nikon now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely on our radar. Nikon's never really been on my radar till this camera, till these features. And you know, and also if you're just an individual that just likes to shoot and has fun doing it, and you have a plethora of money, well, I don't think you'll be disappointed with this. I do know video. I've shot video for years professionally.
But there is a reason we just brought in a new video guy
that does this full-time professionally and actually knows what he's doing. I would say I'm more of a tinkering videographer that gets a job here and there and is able to keep Media Unlocked alive, and we decided to bring on somebody that makes a living doing video. So we're going to bring him on to talk about the video features of the Nikon D850.
And I think we should let Corey have the stage.
So Corey has decided to jump in the frame with me. Bill's out of the frame. He doesn't know so much about video. I know a little bit about video.
Is this the off button?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bill. So Corey's going to go over some of the features of the new Nikon 4K, right?
Yep.
So I'm really excited that this thing's 4K.
Yep.
And but it's not going to be 10-bit.
Not 10-bit.
So you're not going to have as much.
You're going to get that 8-bit nastiness. When it comes to broadcast and stuff, it's not going to be a broadcast camera. And I mean, you can see this in Canon's line as well. They don't really have a lot of 10-bit.
Well, and the biggest thing,
but
DSLRs are not made to be professional cameras.
Yeah, they're not.
They are very strong. They've gotten very strong video-wise, but again, they're better for stagnant shots, like what we're doing right now. We're just sitting because you can pre-focus everything, you can set everything up.
They're also very great for you know, you need to get it in a small area, you know, like
so kind of very they're very good.
It's
for small,
versatile.
Very versatile camera.
Yeah.
I even think the big thing was when the 5D Mark II came out that an episode of House was shot using the 5D Mark II for a few of the shots.
And it's because of that. It's because of full frame, basically.
Right.
You get the nice depth of field and.
Well, while we're saying full frame, the really cool thing about the Nikon is it's going to utilize the full entire frame. The full entire sensor for the 4K, where the 5D Mark IV, it only uses like
the crop.
It's just cropped, right?
Yeah,
so you're
cropped.
not getting the full 4K in a way.
Yeah.
So you're going to get more data, I guess you could say,
Yes.
using, you know. So this is going to be UHD,
UHD.
and it's going to use the H.264 codec.
Yes.
Which you are not a fan of
I'm not.
as a videographer.
I'm not a fan as a videographer just because of all the troubles you get going into post. There's not too much you can do to it color-wise. It falls apart really easily. However, if you are able to get your shot perfect in that shot, white balance, everything, and you like the way it looks right out of camera, then you'll be totally good.
The other really nice thing is that you can get roughly 29 minutes of shooting with the Nikon at 4K using the H.264. Now, the way that DSLRs at both Canon and Nikon use
30 frames per second.
At 30 frames per second. Yeah. But the way they work is that they break up the files into 4 gigabyte files. So you're only using 4 gigs for 29 minutes of shooting.
Yeah.
Which anybody that does any video work, that is really a small amount of data for such a large I guess,
file. Yeah.
right? Like to be able to get that much into 4 gigabytes is kind of crazy.
Well, and that it goes back to the H.264 codec and
right.
the compression.
It compresses it so it's so small where
yeah.
if you take like a more professional 4K camera, I mean 4 gigs may be like 4 minutes or a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, depending on what camera you're using.
Now it will go at 38 by 40 by 2160p. It will go as high as 60 frames per second, and then at 1080p, it's going to go as high as 120 frames per second, which is going to be great for anybody that wants a little bit of slow-mo.
Yeah, and you get a nice crispy look when you got that HD slow-mo. I mean, it's just recently that we've had this feature in DSLRs. I believe Sony was the first one to bring it.
I don't know. They've been innovative in just about everything.
I believe it was I believe it was Sony who started to do HD up to 120 frames per second in a DSLR body, which is, I mean, that's crazy. It's great. I've used it myself. I have a 6500 myself, and I constantly film in 120 just because it looks cool. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to shoot in slow motion? Come on.
Everything looks cooler in
slow motion.
It really does.
It does.
So I think, far as the 4K features are concerned for the Nikon D850, they're good.
They're good.
Now
they're good. They're solid.
The one thing, autofocus. Okay, so Canon still kind of leads the pack. If you want a DSLR, you're going to look at Canon, an actual DSLR with a shutter. Now, if you're looking for mirrorless, I think Sony is still going to be the best option mirrorless-wise for video with autofocus.
Yep.
But if you've got a shutter, you got these bigger bodies. Like the Canon 5D Mark IV, and I think the 6D Mark II, I think, have better autofocusing capabilities with their...
Yeah, they added the autofocus, the dual pixel autofocus.
So it works pretty well compared to how it used to work when they first started doing it back in the T5i or T4i or whatever.
Yeah.
So Nikon didn't really hit on the autofocus. They really they weren't worried about the autofocus. So you're still going to do a lot of manual focusing.
They're more concerned about the consumer to give them the 4K capabilities of that. And it's actually UHD, so it's not even 4K. But there are very few DSLRs out there that do that. And Canon has dropped the ball when it comes to those DSLRs. So.
Yeah, so again, and that's the thing, like, Nikon knew that if they put the D850 out without 4K and some of these video features, people are going to sit there and complain. So like, you know what, let's go on and put this in there, and let's do it as good as we can without it probably costing us too much extra money. And so that's what they've done, which I think is very admirable of them to at least listen to their consumer base.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So guys, of course, if you like this video, click over here for our newest videos, down here if you want to subscribe to us. And of course, guys, we're going to put a link down in the corner if you want to go check out the Nikon D850. You may be watching it before it comes out. You may be watching it after it comes out. If you do click, you buy something from B&H, it does give us a little commission. It does help us out here at Media Unlocked. As always, we'll catch you next time.